Okay, Mr. Sykes, I say let's go.
Okay, good. Thank you, Dr. Kincannon. It's my pleasure this evening to call to order this meeting of the Waco Independent School District Board of Trustees. And we have confirmed a quorum of board members is present. This meeting is available as a video and audio conference in accordance with the governor's suspension of certain open meeting requirements to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. In accordance with those suspended rules, we certify the following. Members of the public may view this meeting online at http://wacoisd.org/CAC meeting. Members of the public were instructed to submit their comments in writing to Joshua Wucher via email by 9 this morning. All items to be discussed or voted upon have been posted in accordance with state law. Finally, if you have any questions about the suspended open meeting requirements, please contact the Office of the Attorney General by calling 888-672-6787 or by emailing toma@oag.texas.gov. So at this juncture, we are moving to the public comment section of the agenda. It's my understanding that there were no public comments submitted, so we can move on. Let me say, as we move on, that this is our 6th meeting. And as always, we can express our appreciation to those that are involved on our Community Advisory Committee. Thank you so much for your participation. The information exchange, the data we're gathering is very, very important as we move through this process, not only for the betterment of the community, but certainly to improve our schools, to improve our facilities, and make our educational experience for our students to the next level. So thank you so much for your attendance. We know it's a big time commitment. This is the 6th meeting of 8, I believe. So we're 3/4 of the way through the process after tonight. And again, thank you for your time commitment and sharing your ideas and thoughts with us. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kincannon.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It's hard to believe we're already to meeting 6. It has been going by quickly, I think. Appreciate you being here this evening. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight, so I'm going to start with a request this evening that we take it real slow this evening, and I'm going to ask you, because of the number of elementary schools that we have and the amount of information that we're covering, I'm going to ask that you write your questions down on a piece of paper to ask later in the session, and to refrain initially during what I call the direct teach part of our lesson, refrain from interrupting our architects as they explain the options. And then when we get a little further along, then we'll allow opportunities for questions and discussion, and we'll have some breakout rooms again this evening. But I would like us to stay really focused on the content and really absorbing that content before we start discussing pieces of it. So with that, if everybody can do that for us this evening, we appreciate it. And I will pass it to our architect, so Connell Robertson. We should have Jared Sturzinger with us.
Yes, ma'am, I am here. Thank you for having us again tonight, and we're excited to be here. I'll kind of run through the first couple slides of we've been a great participant so far. We'll keep that going. Everybody mentioned we're here April 12th on our 6th meeting. And you'll see here meeting 7 and meeting 8, we've started lining up some additional content as we're rounding this out, including a demographer update and starting to hit on a summary of project. And then the following meeting would hit bond capacity, which is our financial planner, talking about how certain dollar amounts affect the district and working through a prioritization of projects. So nearing the end of the facility master plan process. But as everybody noted, we have a lot of content to cover this evening, focusing in on some follow-up from last time, but jump into the elementary school options, which does include a lot of information. So welcome everybody. And again, thank you for participating. We're going to jump right into our CAC meeting 5 follow-up. And out of that follow-up, and I'm going to be passing it over to Kyle here. There were a few questions that were asked last time, so we wanted to make sure to get those addressed here in front of the community. Kyle, you want to take it from here, or you want me to address these?
No, I'm happy to take it from here for a second, Jared, and thank you for opening the meeting this evening. We wanted to hit on some of the questions that have quick answers, and we'll dig deeper into those demographic questions that might be a little more complicated when we have the demographer with us. But one of the questions that we had coming out of the last meeting from the committee was about the makeup of Lake Air Montessori School. And you can see we have about 750 students there, and 160 or so of those students are in the middle school grades 6 through 8. Similarly, there were questions about the facilities condition assessment and what share of those costs across the district were specifically for maintaining Lake Air Montessori Magnet School at the level that the facility is at today. So those infrastructure costs, not necessarily doing anything to address the learning environment or modernize the environment overall. And that's pegged at about $32 million over the next 15 years. And then folks who want to dig more deeply into those facility conditions assessments in each of our presentations about high schools, about middle schools, and tonight about elementary schools, you can see a summary with the range of those costs for each campus. You can go back and find those presentations on our website, including recordings of the meetings. And if you go back to that second meeting, you can find a much deeper conversation about what the facilities condition assessment looked at and what those ranges represent. We also had some questions about Tennyson Middle School and the Atlas program and how those relate to each other. And so we wanted to share a few numbers about Atlas Academy with you tonight. Specifically, someone had asked about the Atlas enrollment and how the number of students in the program related to the middle school attendance zones that those students lived in. You can see that breakdown here with 52 students would normally be zoned to Cesar Chavez, but are attending Atlas, 37 to Carver, 54 to Indian Spring. 88, the largest group of students are zoned to Tennyson itself, and then we have 6 out-of-district students in that total of 237. The map that's behind those numbers shows you where all of our middle school students live in this section of the district that you're looking at. The shaded area for blue is the Tennyson attendance zone, and the blue dots are students that attend Tennyson. What I would point out is in that sort of pinkish salmon area, you'll see a large cluster of blue dots in what is the Crestview Elementary attendance zone. Those are students who are currently zoned to Indian Spring, but those blue dots there are students that attend Tennyson. In effect, even though Crestview is currently part of the Indian Spring Middle School attendance boundary, in practice, most students, nearly all students from Crestview are ultimately going on to Tennyson. And that reflects a boundary that until a few years ago was split, and then some changes were made between Indian Spring and Tennyson, and some changes were made to bring it all into the into the Indian Spring zone. But you can see in practice, we still have a lot of students from that Crestview zone going over. If we can roll forward to take a look at a similar map focused on Indian Spring instead of on Tennyson, you'll see again where those students attending Indian Spring are. Those students are the and are pink color. The specific questions we got talking about Indian Spring and Carver and the possibility of pulling those 2 attendance zones together in one new facility located at Carver was how that would affect transportation and getting to school for students in the Indian Spring attendance zone. And so we've taken 3 different points in the Indian Spring attendance zone, one up towards the top, kind of northern edge of the attendance zone, one on the western or far left edge, but kind of in the center, and then one at the southwest corner, more or less, of the attendance zone, to see how those routes to Indian Spring and Carver would compare. And so in the blue line from each of those dots, you see what the shortest path to Carver would look like. In the yellow line, you see what the shortest path to Indian Spring would look like for those three respective students. For our student that's the furthest to the north, it's actually a slightly shorter distance to Carver because of that kind of unique shape of the Indian Spring attendance zone. And then you start to pick up some distance as you go further south through the zone. So at the furthest point, where you have a student who's actually kind of in that group of folks in the Crestview attendance zone who are actually attending Tennyson, but zoned to Indian Spring, if that student were going directly to Indian Spring, it would be about 4.1 miles. Going to Carver, it would be about 5.7. So the further south, the further west you go, the more there's a difference in the path that you would take between going to Indian Spring and Carver, and the longer that distance gets. But as you can see, kind of the same thing that we highlighted on the last map, there are a lot of students in the Crestview area of the Indian Spring attendance zone that in practice are actually going to Tennyson. Then if we can move to the next map, we're just going to share the same thing, looking focused on the Carver attendance zone, where what kind of jumps out here is you don't see a large pocket of students. You see some students across the zone that are going to other schools, but you don't see that sort of large pocket or geographic area where a whole bunch of students are going there. It also, in this view, kind of highlights the way Indian Spring is at a far corner of the Indian Spring attendance zone, and the area immediately around Indian Spring is not really providing a lot of students to Indian Spring. So there aren't a lot of students at Indian Spring that are inside that sort of 2-mile default for students that you might expect to walk instead of using bus services. And then if we go forward, you have just one more look at the maps for our middle schools, and we'll share all of these after the meeting when we share the slides, so you can look at them in more detail, but you can see what the area around Cesar Chavez looks like. Again, kind of nothing quite like that area of Indian Spring where you see geographically a large number of students or a large cluster of students going somewhere outside the zone. But we hope that gives you a better picture of where students are coming from in the zones, and in particular, a better picture of how that unique shape of the Indian Spring zone affects where students zoned Indian Spring are going to school, and what transportation would look like if some of those students, instead of going across that zone to go to Indian Spring, were going kind of across and up a bit to get to Carver Middle School. So I think that's the bulk of the questions that I was going to hit on, following up on from our last meeting. As Jared noted earlier, we'll be going much more in depth with our demographer on some of the other outstanding questions that are there. Jared.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. And I think if you stare at the dots long enough, they do make a picture for you. Hopefully it's maybe that of Thanksgiving dinner here. But really wanted to kind of come back to the very beginning of where we started as we're reaching, I'll say, our last meeting here to talk about, dive into some of the details of our campuses. And I just finished with the idea of we're almost finished with setting the table. We've got almost all the plates out there, and we're about ready to start filling our plates and moving forward. And so just wanted to remind everybody here as we move forward through the process, what we're looking at. And so that really begins with the facility master plan process, reminding everybody that we were looking at, we're talking two different things here as we move forward. The facility master plan that has that vision for 10 or 15 years out into the future. And pair that with bond planning that usually addresses a 3 to 5 year period of supporting the facility master plan. As we've been working through this process, we have not discussed further, but we're still looking at a potential November of 21 bond this fall, or a May of 22 bond. And you'll see the relationship of continuing this process through the facilities master plan and the bond planning, ultimately working towards a November bond, which would be called in August of this year, or in the option B in the May of 22 bond is kind of picking some of those conversations back up, ultimately working towards a February of 22 call for a bond for a May of 22 bond. Of course, followed by project implementation and construction there to follow. Main thing out of this slide, again, remember, no decisions have been made at this point. The board is still going to evaluate here afterwards how they would like to proceed based on recommendations from the community. But really important for tonight is that idea of the facilities master plan versus a bond program. And that really is highlighted here in the next slide as we look at how we move forward. So to date, we've really been focusing in on items 1 through 4 about looking at new or replacement facilities, talking about district-wide goals, and getting into a little bit of departmental needs as we get in that. But ultimately, those elements will help make up the facility master plan. And that all of those projects over a 10 to 15 year period will a total amount. But then we will look at implementation, and you'll see a little bit of that tonight about what a potential phase 1 project could be. And that gets into the bond planning. So bottom line story here is there are usually multiple bond referendums to be able to support a facility master plan, knowing that when you sit down to Thanksgiving dinner, you can't take the whole table with you as much as you would like to moving forward. And then additionally, kind of coming back to the beginning is when we talk about the facilities master plan, and we've looked through some of these categories, we've looked through all of these categories as we move forward about the facility assessment and educational suitability of the campuses, about the vision of the district, and ultimately, much like Kyle just went into, demographics and capacity about where students are coming and what that vision looks like moving forward. So again, very big picture items for the facilities master plan as we move forward, but we want to remind everybody that we are looking towards the future. So as we proceed tonight, we wanted to present a few facility examples as we talk about elementary schools, and Casey's going to guide us through a couple examples here.
Great, thank you. If you go to the next slide. So this here is an example, Charter Oak Elementary School. This is down in Belton. This is representative of a new elementary school, not a renovated one. And so what you'll see on the top left is, sort of a right-sized gym. I know that's we've got some unique gyms across the district. Down in the bottom left, you see a little more playful elements and sort of the corridors, more kid scale, perhaps different colors, things brought down to a more reachable level for the little kids. Up in the top right is a library, and here I know many libraries and media centers around your district are in pretty good shape, but a lot are not. And some of that has to do with flexible furniture, adequate lighting, adequate supervision.
Come here, Sandy. Come.
Okay. And then on the bottom right is a classroom. Again, just a flexible space, of course, natural light. And you'll notice a variety of different presentation or activities occurring in this space. It's not just.
Okay, we've got someone that needs to mute, but can you go back, Casey? I want to.
Yep.
I want to just say this was my school. I love it. It was designed for about 780 students, and you can see the polished concrete in the halls and in the classrooms, and just a really variety in the seating in the classrooms. And then those little colorful blocks in that hallway are grade level boxes to emphasize anything that the school wants to emphasize to the students as they're traveling to and from the cafeteria. So I'm really proud of this. This was actually a prototype model that the district had been using for several years and then tweaking on it over time just to continue to listen to teachers and make it better. So I just wanted to add that. Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, I forgot it was a prototype, a couple years go away. So we can go on to the next one. And then this is an example of a renovated campus to address permanent capacity. And so you'll notice on the bottom right, there's a whole bunch of portables. Those were moved there to support the phasing. And so sort of in the middle of the screen towards the bottom is the existing campus building. It's got a brown roof that looks very much like the dirt to the north of it. And then you can see sort of to the top left, you can see their gym facility, and it's kind of strung out. And so the portables used to be tucked behind where that angled roof building is. And they moved the portables off to the side so the school can be continuously operational during the construction, and they could safely segment off the construction zone. And so here, the goal was to augment the existing facilities while maintaining active campus. And so the new facilities focused on cafeteria, library, those support spaces. Often when portables are added to campus, your core areas are not up to par or not up to size, to support that expanded population. So if we can go to the next page. These are all images. Part of the renovation up to the top right is a new entry, the original campus. To facilitate this larger capacity, they ended up moving the main entry from one side of campus to the other. So making it a prominent entry that people could find, in a school that had been around for quite a while. And then you'll notice in the images surrounding that, much brighter colors, taller ceiling, better lighting, much more natural light in the spaces, more flexible furniture selections. And so they were able to tie it into the existing campus and carry colors and things across the campus so you get a cohesive feel. So then we can go to the next one. And this one, we're going to transition over to key metrics. And these 8 things that you see on the screen should be familiar to you at this point. We brought them up for the high school discussion, and we brought them up for the middle school discussion. And these are lenses or things we're considering when we're evaluating options. By we, I mean this entire group here. And we've gone into some detail on the high school and middle school. For example, we'll talk a little bit about impact to curriculum. We've talked about ideal campus size, in terms of staff allocations and parent and student interactions. We've also talked about enrollment and capacity. But of course, we also consider the other items such as construction cost and balancing, the facility conditions assessment needs and the learning opportunities needs. If we can go to the next slide. So lens 1 is always the impact to curriculum. I mean, absolutely, the goal for Waco ISD is lifelong learners. And so the goal that we're keeping in mind every time we're talking about potentially new or renovated or improved facilities, we want to be able to support collaborative learning. We want to be able to support self-directed experiences. We want to be able to integrate critical thinking, not only into the curriculum, but also opportunities through the facilities to help facilitate that. And then, of course, appreciation of creativity and imagination. I mean, you think about, especially elementary specifically, so many good opportunities there. In previous meetings like this for the high school and middle school, we've gone into deeper dive into enrollment and other things. You're going to see those woven into these elementary school options that Jared's going to walk you through.
Great. Thank you, Casey, for showing us what's possible on a new facility and a renovated facility and reminding us of that vision for educational facilities. As we go tonight, we are going to take a little bit different approach than we have at the middle schools and elementary schools. And we're going to really focus on 2 main ideas. One, which we're calling the baseline option, which you'll see is very familiar. And then the other is the long-term vision about setting goals to be able to look at how to address the elementary school needs across the district. And you'll see that it is a large challenge. And so we want to make sure that we're headed in the right direction as we move forward. And we'll work through that feedback on that process. We do expect that these concepts will take approximately 2 meetings to kind of go through. So it's not the only time we'll be able to discuss elementary schools. I'll remind you, as Dr. Cannon mentioned at the beginning, we're going to go through these. It's a complicated set of issues. We'll pause before we go to the breakout so we can make sure that the entire group has questions. So save up those questions, write them down, and then we'll jump in and go from there. So the first one is the baseline option. And much like here that you see with the other middle school and the high school campuses, we're looking at the facility condition assessments data and what it's telling us here across the 15-year period. So with the help of School Dude, we're able to look at each individual campus and prioritize low, medium, and high needs across the campuses, similar categories as you saw before, and then look at district totals or campus totals across that 15-year period. So if you advance it one click here, you'll see that we're considering this the baseline option, just like we have previously, of addressing those facility condition assessment needs that we're not necessarily addressing educational space specifically. But here you're looking across 14 campuses, about 817,000 square feet of school, of course, the pre-K through fifth grade, and a capacity of 9,000 students. Here you'll see that, to do this, to address all the current needs from the facility condition assessment, somewhere around $190 to $210 million. So there's a lot of need here over that next 15-year period. And as we've talked about middle schools, high schools, and now elementary schools, it's not something that can be accomplished all in one bite. And we know that moving forward. So this is really where we want to depart and really look at the data to determine what is it telling us and how do we want to move forward. So remember, baseline option, and we'll come back to some of the discussion for all 14 campuses across 15 years is the $190 to $200 million. So as we set out and we look at the facility master plan, we really want to think about that vision moving us forward. What is going to take us from where we are today and how do we move forward? What is the data we want to analyze? So we want to put on those big picture thoughts, be able to look forward out into the future and decide where we want to go, and then start making the right steps moving forward. And so as Casey mentioned, we're going to jump into a little bit deeper into the lenses here as we look at educational or elementary facilities. And the first is as we contrast the facilities condition assessment and educational suitability data. So on this graph, this is very similar to what we saw for the middle school and high school, but of course there are more dots on there. And these dots do have significance. You'll notice along the x-axis, the horizontal axis is the facility condition assessment. And along the left or the vertical axis is educational suitability, and these are contrasted. And so part of the discussion will be, or the idea is the top right quadrant. So Bell's Hill is one of the highest highest facility condition assessment. And as you go to the bottom left, so campuses like Alta Vista or Crestview have some of the greatest challenges. And so as a group, we will want to look at where we draw the line. And so if you look at, as you draw the line, you'll want to start looking at how we address the facilities, or what are we doing to the various facilities across the district. So this line, as you see on the screen, would suggest, as you click one more, you'll see then that we're looking to address this group of facilities. There's about 9 facilities there that include that Alta Vista and Crestview that have the highest need between the facility condition assessment and educational suitability. So there's the greatest opportunity to make improvements within the district within this core group of facilities. So we're thinking about here with this slide, what are the condition of the educational spaces and facility condition assessment. We also want to look at the geographic location of these facilities. And so as we start looking at the map of Waco ISD, on the next slide, you'll see this is very similar to what we saw from Kyle's slide, but these are focused on the elementary school. And so each red block represents one of the campuses within the district. And I'll start contrasting some of the information here as we move forward. So these are the 14 campuses, plus their what I'll call the specialty campuses, like Hillcrest and Lake Air Montessori. But across the rest of the district, you'll notice that kind of in the core center of the district, you'll see there's 6 blocks in the center with white outlines. And those represent the newest and the schools that represent the top right of the quadrant. And it just so happens these are also the 6 schools that have been addressed within the last 20 years with campuses like Provident Heights being built in the early 2000s, or you look at Dean Highlander, Bells Hill, that were constructed here within the last 10 years. And then the group at the bottom left, which actually ring, you'll see the squares without an outline from Cedar Ridge at the top left, working counterclockwise to Kendrick, Alta Vista, and South Waco. Those are some of the older campuses and did not receive as much attention in the previous bond program. So we start considering, how does the geographic location start affecting decisions as we balance out the facility condition assessment and as well and educational suitability. As we advance to the next slide, we start looking at the demographic information. So very much like we looked at the middle school and high school data, as we look at this information, you'll see that current enrollment in the 2020-2021 school year is about 7,500 students. And as you look out to the right, about 10 years out, that will range from the 7,700 estimated next year to about 8,200 at the end of that 10-year period. Again, you'll see that there are ups and downs through that time period and roughly remains flat. So as we look at what is the need identified to be able to support this, and so right now, the current capacity of all the elementary schools is sitting at about 9,000 students. And that's all the K-5 facilities with the exception of Lake Air Montessori. So you'll see a little bit of a difference between the capacity in those two numbers, and that's the one difference there. And so when we talk about the minimum capacity needed, meaning over that 10-year period, what is the maximum number of students that we would see, you would see that the 7294, which actually occurs in 2031, is the maximum number of students that would be enrolled in the K-5 in total in the district. For planning purposes, we generally look at about 5% to be comfortable within the student or within the capacity of the school. So that would say roughly the 76, 78, so about 7,700 students would be the optimum enrollment across the district to align number of seats available, as well as then the number of students enrolled within the district. So the last leg that we want to look at is then elementary school staffing. And you'll again see that this is similar information that was presented 2 meetings ago as we look a little bit deeper. And so again, we'll highlight very similar to the middle schools, the 3 columns on the left represent a single 750 student elementary school. And you'll see that operational costs are roughly $3.5 million. If you look at 2 smaller schools at 375, so they're equally split, you would look at operational cost of about $4.2 million. So as you look at a shift from 2 campuses to 1 campuses at the elementary school, you would be just a touch under $600,000 a year in annual staffing. And why is this important? You'll additionally note there are additional options in terms of educational support. So as you look at categories like the primary literacy aid, you would see at a single campus, you would have actually more aides at the campus than at an individual smaller school. So there's not only some operational cost efficiency, but there's also an enhancement of support at the elementary school level. So lots of data there. So as we move forward. So again, remind everybody, as we move forward and we looked at the facility condition assessment, educational suitability, analyzing that data. We're looking at the geographic data, as well as the enrollment and capacity from the demographics. And additionally, are considering how we're staffing the schools as we move forward. And so as we get to the option, the first option here tonight, we really wanted to think back to that facility master plan and how we move forward. And we want to do that by really looking at what are the goals that we want to set that's going to guide that vision for the next 10 to 15 year period. So Jessica, if you'll take us forward one here. And so what we've looked at for that long-term vision for the facility master plan is first is that we want to address schools with the highest need within the district. That means that we're the highest need. We're going to provide additional education. We want to provide additional educational support staff, so much like we talked, but it also increase operational efficiencies. And then finally, we want to align campuses and capacities to that projected 10-year need over multiple bond programs. And Jessica, I think we want to shift to a different presentation here because I think we've got a little bit of different data. Is it all right if you unshare and I share here? Sorry about that, guys. We made one last minute edit here as we move forward. So as we talk here tonight so we have those long-term vision goals, those 3 goals that we identified. And then we started looking at the schools and how we move those forward. So again, kind of aggregating that data, we would identify 2 groups of schools. The first group would be a minor to moderate need. So that would include the 7 schools you see here on the screen from West Avenue, Provident Heights, Brook Avenue, Dean Highland, J.H. Hines, and Bells Hill, and finally Lake Air Montessori. As we look at the second category of schools, those would be those that would fall in that moderate to significant need. So Crestview, Alta Vista, Parkdale, Cedar Ridge, Mountain View, South Waco, Kendrick, and Hillcrest, PDS. So as we look at intersecting those goals and the long-term vision, as well as the lenses, as we move forward, we would look to address those in 2 different ways. So first is on the minor to moderate need. We would look at maintaining the existing campuses by addressing the facilities condition assessment and the educational suitability needs. So basically meaning that we're going to maintain the parts and pieces that support that building, as well as improve some of the educational needs within those campuses. As we look at the second category, we're going to look at those 8 campuses, and we're going to look at potentially addressing new and or renovated elementary schools over that time period. So that means over the next 10 to 15 years, we'll look as we step through the process to be able to address those needs that best suits the district and the community at that time. You'll additionally note there between the 2 at the bottom, you'll see that those existing campuses in the minor to moderate need would support just under 4,200 student capacity. So as we look through the moderate to significant need, we'd want to make sure those campuses provide a minimum of 3,750 students to meet that maximum enrollment capacity over time. So I'm actually going to pause there, and we've covered a lot of ground very quickly, actually. And so I want to see if there are any questions about the data and how we led up to these long-term goals and ultimately these strategies here.
Jared, this is Casey. The first one I saw in the chat is confusion about the capacity. Somebody saw the enrollment of just over 8,000, but capacity needs is 7,600. I know you said it. Could you repeat it for those that didn't see it on the slide?
So I'll bring that slide back up. So again, yes, the current capacity, and this is where I will say that we work to have fidelity in the data. The current capacity you'll see in the far left column is at 9,940 students. And that includes all the elementary schools, plus it includes Lake Air Montessori, which is actually a K-8 campus rather than a K-5 campus. And so just for simplicity, as we were looking at analyzing elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, we wanted to look at just the K-5 campuses for simplicity here. So the current capacity, when we say is 9,020 students, that's the 9,940 less. And you'll see here at Lake Air Montessori, 920 to bring that capacity at 9,020 students within the districts. Casey, were there any other questions, or did the group have any other questions?
I saw another one in here. When was the last time Waco ISD had a facilities master plan, and how far into the future did it plan for?
I don't know that specific question. I'd have to lean on Dr. Cannon or Kyle if they know that information.
Yeah, I don't know. I know, there was the last, I think, major facilities work was likely University High School, but I would defer to maybe a board member who has a recollection of that. Mr. Sykes?
Yes, I think your reference to university is right. We did have a master plan done at that time. I don't think it took us out to the full 15-year period, but the plan, very similar process here that identified the needs across the district and tried to identify the biggest needs and the lesser needs. So I would say it's probably been between 15 and 20 years.
Okay.
Well, and here before we move on, and I just want to make sure the group is understanding kind of how the data led to the long-term vision and goals, and ultimately the strategies between the two groupings of campuses there, because that'll definitely help set the stage as we move forward. But want to make sure as a group we have consensus about that understanding.
And Mr. Sykes, there's another question there about did we complete the plan at that time?
Yeah, to the extent the plan was developed specifically addressing the needs of the bond election, of course, all the bond money was spent. So I would say, albeit the plan was not as extensive as what we're talking about here, but at that time, the plan was implemented throughout the district using the funds that were identified through the bond election. So, it did have a starting point and a stopping point until those bond funds were spent.
Thank you.
So Aaron asked a question about Lake Air Montessori, and right now that was based on, the question is why is Lake Air Montessori not in the bottom left quadrant, and ultimately the condition of the facilities that we looked at actual numbers relative to each other. That's where it placed it on the graph for all intents and purposes, is that it had out of that grouping stood in between the top right and the lower left quadrant.
And so Jared, the next one in the chat is, I'm seeing, what is the experience of our consultants over time? Are most districts able to complete their master plans?
So I'll speak from our perspective of we're currently working with Round Rock ISD, and you saw the Westwood campus. That master plan was originally developed in 2007, and sequentially the district has not only addressed Round Rock or Westwood campus, but several other campuses within the district in the master plan process. So multiple bond programs and really moving each campus forward. And that's how they were able to balance the bonding capacity with everything else. Additionally, you'll see that Austin ISD is going through a similar process right now with bond programs, setting a master plan and ultimately making sequential steps. And they're having to sometimes do group A first and then group B second and then back to A.
Yeah, and I would add to that, having done facilities work for a long time myself, and kind of similar to what our board president just put in the chat box, that the work is incremental. So it really doesn't end. You really should be continually working on improving your facilities. And it's hard work. It takes a lot of money, and it does carry forward over a lot of time.
Okay. Well, we'll keep going here as we move forward. And as we look at this long-term vision for the facility master plan, it brings the question, what might be a phase one here as we move forward? And that phase one here, what you'll see, excuse me there, one too many clicks, would be an initial approach would be is as we start aggregating that data and looking at the highest and best use of needs and funds, where do we start addressing it? So as we look at a geographic location, we start looking at how do we address campuses and where are they located at. So you'll see in this case, and this will be the theme of it, is that we are looking at addressing Alta Vista, Kendrick, and South Waco, 3 campuses that are closely grouped together. So that's number one. Number 2 is we look at the facility condition assessment and educational suitability. So in particular, Alta Vista has one of the lowest educational suitability scores, and Kendrick has one of the lowest facility condition assessment scores. And a lot of that is based on the age of the facility, the configuration, how they're being used within the campus level. And then finally, we look at enrollment as well as then capacity of the facility. So of those 3 facilities, you'll notice capacity, we're slightly over we have 1,500 students attending those 3 schools with a capacity of about 1,800 students. But what's really interesting is it's actually a mixed bag between permanent and actual capacity. So specifically, Kendrick has more students attending it. It is over capacity. Last year, there were 524 students, and their permanent capacity is 500 students. What does that mean? It means they're actually using portables on the campus to be able to meet that need. And so the concept here as we move forward would be as we look at the data, we identify the highest and best use, we're suggesting that a phase 1 would address Kendrick, Alta Vista, and South Waco campuses. And so how do we do that? We start looking at an approach to those campuses. So when we compare and contrast the baseline option, which is addressing the facility condition assessment needs only, we would estimate those 2020 project costs at $25 to $35 million. So again, that is improving the systems. That is not addressing the educational space within the facilities. It's keeping them as is, as they are. So then as we look and how do we move forward to be able to do those, to address those 3 campuses, the long-term vision right now, what we're proposing is a new elementary school at Kendrick. So it would be a replacement facility, and we're continuing to study, but we would look at a new or renovated school at South Waco Elementary School. So that would bring capacity and capacity relative to the 1,500 to be able to meet the needs. And here that estimated 2020 project total cost would be between $50 and $75 million, depending upon whether we look at that renovated facility for the $50 million to a new facility for $75 million. So again, we'll take a pause here and see if there are any questions that you have. But again, it's based on the facility master plan, setting those goals up front. Where is that highest need and best use? And then as we move forward. So again, we want to make sure that as a group, we have a collective understanding of what we're doing. And so any questions that you have, feel free to ask or send them in the chat. And I see Ms. Alvarado asked about what would happen with Alta Vista. And so much like Indian Spring, we would look at repurposing that campus to another use sometime in the future. So in essence, we would move students balance the students between Kendrick and South Waco for those 1,500 students. Josh asked, is Alta Vista the oldest facility? Yes, it is the oldest facility. And I believe, yes, it was built, as I recall, either 1916 or 1919 is what I recall. And so then Chris identified that concerned our facilities have aged to such a degree. She likes the idea of a master plan. I do want some more information on how we convince. I think convince, and I'll keep with the high level of data. I think the goal of the facilities master plan is identifying the data and the understanding of the condition of the existing campuses, what it takes to improve them, as well as setting that bar for expectations for campuses in the district but then as well communicating that information out. So just like we're working with you as a group, it's great for you to be an advocate for this same process of communicating out what's happening within the district. And I'll see if Dr. Cannon or one of the board members, or maybe Amy, has any additional thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I think ongoing communication about the district's needs and giving overview presentations of the work of this committee is essential to keeping the community connected to move forward with multiple bond referendums. And I also think, just going back and reminding the community of the work that we do, and showing them, that we were good stewards of their money.
And of course, your great team like Kyle and Josh can help work on that messaging and support district communication that can make it out to the community as well. So there were two questions from Misty about addressing elementary. Would there only be 2 elementary schools? And yes, the idea is that Kendrick, South Waco, and Alta Vista would then be supported by 2 elementary schools in that zone, in those zones.
Yeah, I think for Alta Vista, it might be, and Kyle might want to chime in here, but it might be important for us to bring back some similar maps to show where the kids are attending Alta Vista from and where the students live. So we could do something similar next time. Kyle, would you add any information here about Alta Vista?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add tonight is we're actually pulling a significant number of students across I-35 to attend Alta Vista. That's another place where there's kind of an unusual looking attendance boundary that doesn't necessarily fit the road. So a very significant chunk of the students are coming from that area kind of to the north that you see that comes up between the Kendrick and Bells Hill attendance zones. But we can bring you a more detailed look at that at a few.
Sounds like Kyle's having fun with his kids as well, running around. So as we move forward, and Ida definitely had some opinions about kind of the interpretation, and that's really what we're wanting to focus on tonight here in our breakout activity, is we want to get feedback on this. We want to touch base on 2 questions tonight as a reminder. So the first thing that we want feedback on is the facility master plan vision moving forward. Is what is that long-term vision? And ultimately, are these the goals that best support facilities within Waco ISD as we move forward? And if these are the goals, the question then is this approach with Kendrick, South Waco, and Alta Vista the right phase 1 here as we move forward? So it looks, there's one more question here, I believe. So it sounds like we have 3 smaller, older schools, and it makes more sense financially. So in essence, yes, Aaron, to answer Aaron's question is, does it make more sense financially and for the resources for the students to have 2 medium-sized schools? And yes, that is what we're proposing, is that 2 schools would address the ongoing maintenance and operation that are needed at the campuses. There's some operational efficiency and enhanced educational resources. And then as well, geographically and demographics, it starts working out as well. And so unless there are any other questions, we're going to break into the 3 groups tonight. And we'd like to hear from all the community members to be able to provide feedback on the goals and these options moving forward. And so Aaron did ask one question about keeping the 3 schools as is means a lot of duplication and potentially lower outcomes for students. And so I know from a staffing standpoint, yes, there would be some duplication, like in having 3 principals, but I'll let Dr. Cannon or the district address the other half of that question.
I'm sorry, we were talking about 3 to 2 and Aaron's comment, correct?
Go ahead, sorry.
Would you clarify the question you're wanting to
Yeah.
answer, Jared?
The question is, if you maintain the 3 schools, does that impact outcomes for students?
Well, there are a lot of variables and outcomes for students. And so I would go back to educational vision and looking at what we're trying to establish in terms of facilities and the kinds of spaces we want for our students. So, I think it's efficiencies in the number of students, but also there are just so many variables with instruction and professional development and preparation of our teachers. So it would be hard to say for sure that, 2 versus 3 would be better or not better, but I'd say 2 improved facilities would certainly facilitate the kind of instruction that we're talking about. And I apologize for the squeaky toy in the background.
And then Chris did ask a question I see on Cedar Ridge, and I would bring back this chart, which there you'll see Cedar Ridge does fall within that moderate to significant need. And so then as we progress, what this is saying is over time, Cedar Ridge will need to be looked at in a similar response to have a new or renovated elementary school through the facility master plan. And then Christina asked about, to clarify, is the $50 to $75 million 2 new schools or only 1? And so right now, what we are currently studying, and this is where we really wanted to get the feedback, is the $50 million leans toward a new elementary school at Kendrick and a renovated South Waco, and the $75 million leans towards 2 new facilities, 1 for Kendrick and 1 for South Waco. And there's some middle ground there in the middle. And then a community advisory committee number 7 identified that Kendrick, South Waco, and Alta Vista, the classrooms for their various grade levels don't meet the current state requirements of the 800 square foot minimum. And that is correct, is that at the age they were built, we looked yesterday, South Waco is roughly about 650 square feet per student. I've not looked at the other campuses to know them off the top of my head. So any final questions?
Just going back to Chris's question about Cedar Ridge. So I think those are additional phases that can be added to the plan. And so the option tonight just begins with a conversation about phase 1. Thank you, Jared.
No problem. And so then I've seen kind of several comments in the chat about I'll say the opinions about the solutions. And that's really what we want to hear here in the breakout as we look at, looking at taking the students at Alta Vista and spreading them to new and or renovated facilities at Kendrick and South Waco, as well as, again, those long-term goals about addressing the highest need, addressing staff and operational efficiencies, and then addressing overall district capacity. And so any final questions before we go?
There's a question in there about why Alta Vista is the one that's being repurposed. You want to talk about facilities conditions with that, Jared?
Sure. So I'd say there's several different elements with Alta Vista. So number 1, it is the oldest campus. It does have the greatest need. If you recall the presentation from Kevin 2 meetings ago, I don't know specifically, but it is one of the campuses that had the greatest damage from the winter event. And again, that is based on what occurred there at the campus, but also the insulation that's in the walls. It's older construction, doesn't have as many safety elements as far as required by current code. And then as well, just the layout of the campus and the size of the room starts becoming challenges when we talk about the educational suitability. So
It's
it's
also a tinier, smaller piece of property.
Yep. So there's less opportunity to build adjacent on facility on that property. So
And I would say no particular thought yet in regards to repurposing it for Dr. Rowe.
okay, well, hopefully everybody has their comments ready, and I will ask Josh to break us out into our 3 rooms. We're going to have about 20 minutes. We're not planning to do a report out at this point. For the comments, we're really looking at getting feedback on these 2 options and collecting the feedback. So we will see everybody in the next room, and then we will come back and close things out for this evening. Looks like everybody here is coming back. So we'll just give it here one more second before we wrap up for tonight. And appreciate everybody. I know in our group, we had really great discussion and, talked about the opportunities and challenges that this discussion brings. And, one of the more powerful statements I heard is without vision, people perish. And, ultimately vision creates hopes and dreams. And I think that's what we're hoping to do, but, find that balance of community and everything else. So as we finish out tonight, really appreciate everybody's patience here as we jump into this difficult subject. And so as we talk about wrap ups and next steps, our goal really was here tonight to focus on that long-term vision and making sure that we're setting the right framework for making decisions, look at the data, and then as well get feedback on what those goals are, and then how do we continue moving forward. So we will bring back some additional detail and content as we move forward here in meeting number 7. So that meeting is on May 3rd. And again, we'll hear the demographers update and then get into some sub-area project and elementary school follow-up, followed by our last meeting, kind of wrapping it up here as we move forward. So appreciate everybody staying on time and feedback, and really appreciate the focus tonight. Difficult subjects to talk about, and we thank you for your time. I saw President Tikel is with us, so I don't know if she has any last words, or Alan would like to jump in.
Well, I'm just so happy I made it. I had a work commitment, and then I was driving in my car with my, I shouldn't say what I was doing. Anyway, I've been watching the whole meeting. And it's been really great. And my breakout room was great. And as usual, great feedback. We appreciate you all so much. And we appreciate your honest and candid feedback and good questions. And we're just looking forward to continuing the conversation May the 3rd. Anything else, Dr. Kincannon?
No, peace, kindness, and love.
Yeah, I love that. I love
Great
that.
way to end. That's our students' artwork. So
Awesome.
oh.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes, for filling in for me.
All right. I don't know if you need to officially adjourn the meeting, but
No,
appreciate
we're adjourned officially.
Thank y'all,
Thanks,
everybody.
Angela.
See everybody soon.